Hey guys, what's happening? This is Dave for Beta Ready. Today what I want to talk to you about is how to adjust your rate profile. This is a continuation video from something I did before in the As Fast as Possible video series. That was to do with exponential. This is kind of a continuation from that, so if you're interested in that, just go back and watch it. It'll be somewhere around. I'm getting questions, or I've had a question at least, let's be honest. Well, basically this person expressed to me their confusion about how the exponential and the rates profiles actually work with Betaflight. So what I wanted to do is give a quick run through, really simplify all the variables on it. And to do that, what I've done here is I've loaded up Betaflight. I've got the quad attached here. I've got the transmitter sitting here ready to be turned on, hopefully volume down. And what we're going to do is I'm going to zero down some of the variables so that you can see the effect. And what you'll see here will be how a lot of the flight software and the configurators used to work before people cleverly started adding in some level of exponential. I've already come and I've dropped down the rate profile from my normal one. If you're interested, that's about the settings that I run at normally. It's fairly sensitive. If you haven't flown at these sort of levels, just take your time, be a little bit careful. You'll see I've got two separate profiles. When you look at the rates profile itself, I've got my pitch and roll set to a fairly high rate, and I've got my yaw set to a fairly low rate. This is quite a new setting which I'm just getting comfortable with. Shout out to Ladrib on this one because he's the reason I changed this one, and it's working great so far. So you should check out his channel. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to mess with my current settings. I've given you a good chance to actually look at them now. Is I'm going to jump over to a rate profile while I haven't actually changed the rates. I have changed the PIDs though. I haven't changed the rates on mine. At the current setting, your quad will fly nice and buttery. It's probably fairly good settings for racing, but you probably want to tweak them a little bit, or at least understand them so that you get a feel for how you will fly better, or how you will feel better when you fly even. First thing I'm going to do, we're just going to remove some of the variables here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the RC rate back down at 1, just as it's set already. You'll see there's no RC Expo set on the screen, and I'm going to take the super rate down to 0 so that you see what happens. The thing to pay attention to here is when you're looking at these columns here which talk about the different settings on here, you've got RC rate, you've got super rate, and then we've got this third one along from there, which is the max velocity in degrees per second. So essentially what's happening here is this quad is set up so that when you actually hit the sticks all the way to full deflection, so once the stick's all the way across hitting the sidewall, you're getting 662 degrees per second of roll. That's not quite 2 rotations in 1 second, but it's close. And it's also fairly slow. I think you'd find it fairly slow. I find it fairly slow. This can make tricks quite hard because you need a lot of altitude to kind of get out of them. So most of us tend to run a little bit more exponential when it comes to freestyle, so we like that at degrees per second a little bit higher up. So what I'm going to do to start with here to show you the effect of reducing super rate is I'm just going to take it all the way down to 0, and I'm going to leave the yaw set as it is, and what we'll do is we'll just have a look at the effect of that. So if you were looking at the graph, so this graph over on the right here, you would have seen that the yaw rate was the same as the pitch and the roll rate. The way to read this is each of the colors gives us a readout for each of the axes that we are affecting or spinning around. So you'll see on the blue one, what I'm doing here is changing the yaw. And if I do pitch and roll now, you'll see I'm getting movement up and down on the diagonal, not necessarily up and down. That would be affecting the quad. And what you'll see is that each of those quadrants has some graph lines behind them. And that's really good because what you can do is you can move your stick and you can see the effect of that amount of stick deflection and basically how much roll you'd be getting from it. And you'll see on the flat line, it's not very clear on this one because the yaw is fairly high. But what you can do is you can see as I move the stick, I'm getting a readout on the rolls there. You can see when I push it all the way across on the roll, I'm getting 200, and likewise I'm getting 200 on the pitch, which isn't very fast at all. So you can see when you take away the super rate, we effectively end up with no exponential. So this is a linear graph. It's not an exponential graph or an exponential curve, which is where you get that sort of flat midpoint and then that high peak towards the outside or the end of the stick movements there, which is usually what we want. What I'm going to do now is just while it's set there to 0, I just want to show you the effect of the RC Expo. And the interesting thing here, and the point to really note, is that the max velocity, or the degrees per second, is to the left. It's the column to the left of the RC Expo, and that kind of gives you a hint as to what this is going to do. Effectively, what should happen when we add this on is that the degrees per second is going to stay largely unchanged, but what we're going to do is actually introduce some exponential now. So I'm going to take this up to 0.7, and you will see now we no longer have that linear graph, we have the exponential now, so we've got some curve in there. So that's what's going to happen. Basically, if we change any of the other settings and then we introduce RC Expo, what we're doing is we're just affecting the end of the travel. We're not actually affecting the overall rotational speed. We're affecting how that rotational speed is applied when we move the sticks, but we're not actually affecting the overall speed that the quadcopter will be moving at. So I'm going to take the RC Expo back to 0. There you go. And what we're going to do now is we're going to start adding some super rate. And I'm going to take it up to a conservative 0.6. Again, this time we're going to leave the yaw as it's set now. And what you can see there is with no RC Expo, we actually have a little bit of an exponential curve. So what Betaflight has very kindly done, and the developers, who we should all say thank you to because they don't charge us for this so far, is that they've actually put a little bit of exponential in there, because they know that for most people we tend to fly better with a little bit of exponential on. So thank you Betaflight developers. From there, what I'm going to do is try and get up to a setting that's closer to where I like to fly. So what I want to do, I want to end up around about 1200 degrees per second of rotation. So I'm just going to creep these up. And take the RC rate to about 1.2, and I'm going to take the super rate up. Seriously though, this is one thing that I've always wanted to talk or ask the developers about. Do you know how bad these up and down buttons work? And it's not just me, I've seen this happen on lots of different computers, and when I watch other people's videos like Josh Bardwell, those people, you tend to find that these buttons don't work very well. Look, it's working perfectly now. It had to happen, didn't it? There we go, it's doing it. I didn't move the mouse at all. And what happens is it starts clicking down from there. Okay, so what I've done there is I have added in a fairly high super rate to a fairly comfortable RC rate. And what should happen now is when we move the sticks, we get a fairly conservative movement towards the start. So the first half of the stick movement is very comfortable. But when I deflect it, I get an absolutely nuts roll rate. If you guys are looking to do those really fast little crazy flips that you see people do, or if you are crashing a lot when you are trying to do your flips because the rate is so slow, this is the trick. This is what you want. You want a higher maximum velocity. So you want the degrees per second fairly high up. From there, what I might do if I were tuning my quad, if it didn't feel right, so let's say I was in the middle of my stick movement and I was finding that when I moved it, it felt really sluggish. What that would mean is that I needed to actually drop the RC rate. But you'll find as I drop the RC rate, that maximum velocity is dropping down as well. What I would do is I would adjust the RC rate down, and then I would push the super rate up until I got it pretty much where I had the same maximum velocity. And then from that point I would fly it again. And again, if it felt sluggish, what I might do is I might drop that RC rate again. We're getting rid of that flat line in the middle of the stick movement, and we're letting more and more, we're letting the super rate actually take control of this one. So we're introducing the exponential a little bit earlier on in the graph. And I would just keep adjusting that way until I got something that flew like I wanted it to, so that you were getting the same sort of feeling through the stick movements that you would expect. Because by far the most important thing is that the quadcopter is doing what you expect it to. That's what's going to let you fly really well. If it's moving in a way that you don't expect it to, it's not going to fly well. Because by far the most important thing is you having a consistent feeling. So the expectation you have when you move those sticks translates to the reality of how the quadcopter or the multicopter that you're flying is actually moving. I hope that helped. But let me just sum this up for us really quickly. The RC rate affects the flat line towards the middle of the curve. So that graph that you look at, if you want a flatter line in the middle where it's more linear, you will increase the amount of RC rate. If you want a lot of exponential towards the end of the stick, or if you want to bring the exponential towards the middle, what you're going to be doing is reducing the RC rate and compensating by increasing the super rate. If you want more exponential more quickly, if you want to have more of that maximum velocity or the degrees per second happening sooner on in the middle of the curve, what you need to do is drop the RC rate but bring up the super rate so that the maximum velocity is staying largely unchanged. You're keeping the same rate, but what you're doing is you're bringing the effect of that in earlier on. You will see sometimes people actually add RC exponential, and what that's going to do is it's going to let us keep the overall roll rate pretty much the same, but it's going to let us flatten out that line in the middle even more. So the RC Expo has the effect of dragging the super rate further out towards the side on it. So effectively the RC rate gives us a flat line in the middle of the curves. Super rate is what actually defines the initial exponential, but it does have an effect on your overall roll rate. So what you've got to remember is that the super rate and the RC rate actually interact to give you your overall degrees per second. If you're changing one and you want to work at a specific roll rate, you need to change the other one in the opposite direction. If I increase RC rate, I need to drop the super rate to maintain the same roll rate. If I want to go the opposite way, vice versa, do the same thing in the opposite direction. If you want to keep things the same but affect how the exponential is applied, if you want to flatten the line in the middle more consistently and get a very steep curve towards the end, that's when you add RC Expo. And that's not actually going to affect the overall roll rate very much at all. It'll give you, a couple of degrees per second difference, but overall it's not going to give you much difference there. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something from this. I always try and keep these videos fairly simple because it's fairly complicated already. We don't need any more complication, especially if we're trying to get a lot of people into this hobby. If it has helped, please remember, like, share. If you have questions, comment, and hopefully we'll see you back here the next time there's a video. If you really liked it, subscribe, be there somewhere. And yeah, we'll see you again soon, hopefully. Thanks for watching. Bye.